We're going to start right now. All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order. Good morning, everybody. Mr. Harrison, will you please lead us in invocation?
Sure. Pray with me. Our Father in heaven, Lord, us one more time that we bow our head and humble our heart before you. We thank you for the beautiful day that you've given us. We thank you for each one that is at the table here representing the county, and we ask your blessings, Father, that you would help us to make wise decisions, that we would consider the leadership of thy Holy Spirit, Father, to lead us and guide us in the decisions that we make. We ask you to forgive us for our sins. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All righty. I'd entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Did anybody sign up to speak? I did not have one out.
Well, if there's a sheet, I'll sign it.
Do you want to speak?
Of course.
Okay. Well, you know what? You didn't sign it, but I didn't have it out. So.
All right. Kevin Baker, 424 A.B. Wade Road. I figure after 10 budget hearings, I guess I'll be vested in the retirement plan. But as I sat out in my car looking at the facility, I realized everything we have here was paid for by a taxpayer before me, hopefully after me. I hope you're diligent when looking through the numbers. You know, as Mo would say, just say no. It's hard to do that sometimes. But sometimes it's not the people that are petitioning you, it's the people that have to go to work every day that can't petition you. And that's kind of why we're here, just to kind of keep an eye on that. I brought some refreshments because an angry commissioner is not a frugal commissioner. So please have a treat. We appreciate what you're doing. We know this is hard work. But think about the people that they live in portables. They don't spend money to buy portables. That's what they live in, so or to replace portables in school. So just think that way, folks. I think we're going to have a great budget season, so good.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks, Coach.
All righty. Ms. Quantum, please join us. I look back there. Yeah, go ahead. Any other notes? Okay. Yeah, let's get some room for David. All righty. I have no report on here. I just want to make a couple notes for just the next couple days here. And this is, Mr. Long, you and I kind of spoke about the general structure of the agenda and kind of how we're planning on operating here. So you'll notice that we have a really packed agenda today and a really packed agenda tomorrow. I can't tell people not to ask questions or not go down into rabbit holes. All I would note is that the purpose of these little segments is to allow either the finance director or the chairs of in leadership of the different departments to brief their budgets. Of course, ask a question if you need to, but we've got a lot of them to get into. When we're planning on doing our deliberation and making any adjustments that we may feel necessary, that I think is going to be held off until tomorrow, or we'll have a big block of time to do that. Again, not saying you can't, but there is time allocated for that. Depending on how things go, I think it is very likely that we will call, that I will call a special called session, post our adjournment on Friday to give both the public and the department heads a chance to review what we came up with and come back with any questions or concerns that they may have, so that we have kind of a thorough vetting before we ultimately pass this back to this committee and then on to the full commission. So those are my notes. Sorry to take that little bit of time today. Just I know we're all kind of new sitting on this committee, and I wanted to put out that general guidance to keep us efficient. I typically like to try to take questions from the crowd if it's needed, but especially from commissioners. But for the next 2 days, I will probably refrain from doing that just in the interest of getting through this. Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Someone turned those lights on.
There are the red dot. Can you see them?
Yeah, they should be off.
Yeah,
I covered those for a reason.
Yeah, we're recording using the owl.
Is it broke or?
No, it's just the video or the audio
Quality's
is
not
bad.
there, and we're getting the company out to fix it.
Yeah.
I'm sure he flipped it on.
So we're using the ALF. Okay. Mr. Loing, your
Couple
report?
things, and what Mr. Schoaf was saying is you will, for anything you adjust, they are allowed a hearing. Today, we've got interactive Excel sheets, but you know all the studies, there's errors in Excel. We spent a whole lot of time putting error checking points, but after this meeting, we'll still need to go back and look for errors, so when you think the meeting's gonna end Friday, Monday, we'll be checking for errors, and probably Tuesday, and then Wednesday notifying the department, so you probably will need another hearing day. The other thing is I've done a lot of budgets, and as Mr. Schoaf was saying, if you just mainly gather your information now and do all your cuts at the end, you'll go a lot smoother because you're allotted 16 hours, probably 16 is not enough. If you go the other direction, probably from my experience, you're gonna end up with 60 or 70 hours. If you start going hours each, you're gonna run over that. First, let's go over here, Ms. Browning, if you can hit the general fund summary and go down to show the disparity between unassigned fund balance. Unassigned fund balance in your general fund is the balance that you can use for anything. You're restricted over here, really don't need to focus on those because you're restricted, is restricted by the Constitution, legislative kind of act donation, so it can't be used for any other purpose. Then you've got committed and assigned that has not significantly changed. But if you look at these numbers right here, this $5.7 million is the difference between revenue and expenditures. You have a rather large budget, so you're gonna have unspent appropriations, and we're conservative on revenues. So even at this particular amount here, if you look, we're still kind of picking up reserves. But the thing is, you cannot really count on the economy's going to be perfect next year. We're already concerned about recessions. I'll put some of that into the numbers, but not to the extreme amount. So when you look at that, that's how much, at the starting point that you're off, so you're about 1.6 million to the worst. Also, there's several things that were sent to us later that I think is gonna cost you several $100,000, so it's probably closer to 2. By my opinion, this number right here, you really need to, decrease this number right here. It's too high. So you're really looking off this budget in some way or another. Probably, when you add the 300 in, you probably need to cut somewhere $2 to $2.5 million at least off this budget to make it where you're not gonna be bleeding into reserves. Your next budget's go,
Hey, I got a question on that.
yes, sir.
Explain to me again on the current OB there, what's that -5.7?
That's the difference between your revenue and expenditures, and it's been there for years. If you look on your actual, your budget sheets that we'll have at the end, it'll show you the trend. This trend has gone up. It usually maintains 4.5 to 5. If you can get this number down to below 5, you should be in pretty good shape, based on the amount of unspent appropriations.
Okay.
My two concerns, that's historical, but there's two things playing against you. One, we all think there's a significant recession. Number two, you have historical inflation, so departments are moving a lot more money. So I think this number here needs to actually go down at this point too because of inflation and possible recession. So the way it looks to me right now, after you add in these things that you're gonna need for like some utilities and things we got later, we could get into time. I think you need to really pull about $2.5 million out of this budget.
Mr. Long, I mean, you and I spoke, and maybe you updated numbers because we went through several components of this. I thought we were targeting cutting between 4.5 to 5. If
Well,
we could
you've
get
also
to
got
it.
capital projects. This is just
Okay,
one fund.
gotcha.
Your capital projects have significant, some of those expenses need to be moved over to your general fund too.
Okay.
So that's where we're gonna go. But if we go to your next, we'll go through each fund really quickly, and then we'll go through before the 8:30 mark, the adjustments that will need to be done, and kind of the timing of what caused them, and any concerns we've got. Courthouse and jails balanced, the Mr. Isabel will go over it, so there's not really a lot of need to look at this point. One thing to say about this fund, there was a lot of discussions about it earlier. Two things you need to understand if you can go to the revenue sheet real quick on courthouse and jail, Bethany. Okay. There's two sources of primary funding here. This first one's a litigation tax. What this litigation tax says is it first has to fund maintenance, repair, or improvements on the courthouse and or jail, and any excess can be budgeted by the county commission anywhere. Number two is just telephone commissions. Technically, those can be used for anything. So there was a lot of discussions earlier that courthouse and jail money was used inappropriately. If this money was not in here, then it would require, a lot more of county commission approving any expenditures outside of the litigation tax. It's called courthouse and jail maintenance because it contains that litigation tax. This fee could actually, in its expense, be put over the general fund. It's not really restricted in any form or fashion. So that was some of the discussions earlier. Drug control is one the sheriff presents the budget for. It does show a positive balance. These are fees, forfeitures, and fines that can only be used for drug control purposes, so there's not really a big need to look at that. Number two is your debt service. As I'm saying, we may want to visit sales tax and bring it down, but it's going down to its difference best. If you look on it, actually showing a positive growth, but you do need to show a growth. If you've looked, we significantly drained it last year to do stuff, so you do need to build some of your reserves back. But another one, if you look here, it's gonna project $27 million because Sumner County issues bonds that's earnings are exempt from taxes for the purchaser, for the investor. We do need to keep this balance here at no more than 13 months of interest and principal or any foreseeable payments. And that would be based on next year's, where you're gonna probably need to, one, stop the climb, and my recommendation would be to move money over your capital, the way you can pay those as you go versus borrowing anyway. So you're not gonna have like a huge excess from this, but you're gonna need to slow down the growth, because if we go, Beth, if you can go to the debt service schedule, and it's kind of at the end, and we can show them where the target will have to be at next year. You went a little too far, didn't you? You're already the salaries. Keep going. It should be a little further forward. No, right there. Okay. Next year, because this year go down to that corner where it shows our interest, and we could do it on the sheets, but it's just go down, keep going, right there. This is your debt payments this year, so 13, if you divide that by 12 by 13, we're gonna be well within that balance. But when you go into next year, if you divide that by 12 and times by 13, you're probably what, 23, 24 million? You're gonna hit 27 this year, so what you need to start looking at that point would be my recommendation from a financial end, is you move those pennies over to capital, and you look at paying in capital use as you need to go versus putting it into debt service. And that's what's historically been done in this county for many years. When your debt service builds up, you move stuff over to capital, and we'll take it out for operation because of inflation if necessary. Let's go back to the next fund, which is else capital or highway. And I know I'm jumping around, but I'm gonna give you some of the highlights.
No, that's very helpful. I know.
Capital, this is the one that me and Mr. Schoaf was talking about, one of them, and also highway. If you look, last year we had 2.6, this year negative 3.1. This fund honestly needs a balance of about I would say $1 million for emergencies in there, at least. So you have significant cuts, there's been a lot of requests, and we'll talk about the tax rates that are built into these budgets as soon as we go through this, but that's one of the large ones. This needs right here probably, and some of it may be moved to ARPA, that's why we come up with the $4 million mark. This thing right here needs to realistically become about $4 million.
Yeah.
Go on down to highway, which should be, yeah, right there's highway. Highway, let's go down to it. A couple of things about highway, he's showing a negative 737, that should be at least 750. The state comptroller's office recommends at least 1/12 of expenditures in there, we didn't have it last year. My recommendation would actually be slightly higher, but within that far, it really needs about $1.5 million worth of adjustments, else revenue or expenditures, to bring you back to where you need to be in this fund right here. So there's another one, about 1.5.
And I would note on that one, we had this discussion with Mr. Ellis, Mr. Long and I did. I think there's a good plan. We'll let Mr. Ellis present his budget as is, and he'll make his notes, but I think we've got a good way forward to get that up and still get him what he needs that he's amenable to. There will be we'll put forward a couple options to this group.
Yeah, there will be these about 3 or 4 good viable options. Mr. Ellis's budget's built on what I think around 52 miles of road.
Yeah, and that's more than we've been doing. I mean, so we wanted to, he has a target of 52 miles, and we've been, I think, historically paving 38 to 40. So, we don't need to make that jump all at once. We do want to build it up. But
and there's a way to bring it up this year without increasing
That's right.
MOE, but it's going to take some prioritizing which way you're going to do it. If you want to cut the road miles or move some other funding around, you can do it without increasing the MOE on this particular budget.
Yep.
Before we go to the property tax, Bethany, if you can just go back to the general fund appropriation, and we sent the attachment, but something to point out. There's a couple of things that have happened lately, and they're important. If you can just go down and just do a search for ARPA. That's the ARPA. We sent you the sheet, but I want to show you a couple of things about it. We've got the ARPA request back, but there's a couple of things you probably want to look at the front end. We'll at least have in your mind before we start the hearings, and then I'll look at the tax rates. And that'll keep us on our schedule pretty close. There'll be a couple, but there's not a whole lot. Is that the big one? Yes, go on now. A couple of things that's happened recently, and this is one I sent the email to Mr. Shove. You guys have, and there's a discussion of moving 50% of the COVID back to local, and there's a couple of reasons to do that. One, those, well, originally, all of the COVID-19, that's the risk premiums, or whatever you want to call them, had a $23,000 per limit employee, and you're going to bump up against those. Plus, eventually, it needs to be dealt with anyway, because the money's running out and the timing. What's happened recently that nobody knew about, including our consultants, April 10th, the feds ended the COVID-19 emergency, which probably should have been earlier. The requirements has always said you can do these risk assessments as long as there's COVID. Well, the feds came back with a Q&A right after that and said once the emergency is over, you can no longer do COVID-19 risk assessments. What this means for you is you can still pay basically the equivalent same thing that you were, instead of as a risk assessment, you're going to pay it as premium pay, but one caveat is everything after April 10th, including anything next year, will have to count toward the $10 million revenue shortfall. And I've changed that on that sheet I emailed everybody that's in your packet.
So
But that is something you're gonna need to navigate this year.
you may want to say that one more time. So we're going to have a couple options here, because I think what we're talking about there is the
Talking about the pay for
the
EMS.
salary supplement.
And we're talking about the EMS
Right.
salaries they use for.
And the number one is
Yeah.
to move half of it back to local this year, which I
Right.
think is a really good, to kind of bleed off. But what it's caused is like, and that's what I was gonna show while I was looking at this sheet. You got $37 million total, okay? $10 million of it only can be used for revenue replacement. Everything outside of that's like maybe drainage, broadband, water lines, COVID related in some form, or economic disparities due to COVID. It's something of that nature. What happened was these supplements we could count out of the main 37 million. You not have to count toward the 10 inside of that. Everything after April 10th is going to have to be counted toward that $10 million. So we're going to start in finance, we'll start allocating it toward it. But what it's going to do is when you go down this sheet, and if you look, there's $1,044,000, that's what I'm estimating based on the current, it's going to have to come out of that
And
10.
that's the salaries for the EMS that was used for COVID money.
Because we can no longer call those risk payments.
Yeah,
anymore.
you'll have to call them like salary supplement or retention supplement, something else.
And the feds informed everybody.
Which is
on-
what it
they-
was to
They have these
begin
long list of Q&As, and the feds informed all of us on a big long list of Q&A of that requirement about 3 days ago.
But bottom line here, because I don't want to get us
It's
into
gonna make
too
us
much
hard to do
read,
the hard work.
we've got, you're going to have a couple options here. We can either pull from this, just to make it simple, we're going to either pull it from this 10, or we're going to have to move it back to local. I mean,
Right.
that's really,
And my recommendation would be start moving as much as you can
Yeah.
out of local from any excess and excerpts and get rid of it, and/or
I mean, the other option, which I,
really
you
cut the
know,
pay.
which I'll say here, I'm not for, although I can understand why some people would be, it would be to cut it back. You know, that would be also on the table, although I do think there's, the general guidance, at least that I tried to put out from this body was that we were gonna attempt to maintain that. But I just wanna be, have for the record here that this is a problem to maintain. It's very difficult to do this.
The budget's built right now currently, and it can be changed quite easily to move 50% to local. And move some tax like we talked about the other day. The only thing that's changed since we talked the other day is everything after April 10th is gonna have to go through the $10 million. So
Yep.
when we go through ARPA today and you come up with your plan, we need two. One is within the 37 total, but the things we think is gonna be within the 10. After that's done, then we'll email it to Ms. Norfleet, which will send it to our consultants, and they'll start trying to determine for sure things that do not have to go into $10 million. Because you're gonna run up into two issues there. And then our third issue is December 31st, 2024, you're gonna need everything completely locked in, because any changes after that point, say for instance, something decreases in price, we're gonna lose those revenues if you lock the money in to 24. Basically, December 31st, 2024, you have to have everything locked in, and all the cash has to be out the door by December 31st, 2026. And we've all heard about the federal clawing back COVID funds. As far as we can determine at this point, these funds aren't on the discussion, it's other funds. That's what we've understood. I think actually, one of the commissioners actually wrote to the congressman's office, and that's their understanding too right now.
I haven't got a reply back.
But I think he sent one out, but he said that's their understanding right now, that something could change.
Yeah.
But if it does, we'll keep you apprised as quickly as we can for the changes. Let's go back to the very first, because we've only got about 8 minutes. Number one, go back to the taxes, and let's talk about what taxes were. This right here is what taxes were in last year's budget. A couple of things, one, there was 2 cents that's taken back out of this because the expenditures is too for the one-time fire department. There was discussion giving the one-time money, but that's where some of the drainage out of your debt service came from. And that was discussed from the beginning. This is for the 386 match, the 10 million, that was about $2.5 million last year, that needed to come back out. This, last year, there was in here, there was a one-time, amount moved from debt service to capital to finish up a school and actually, I guess, renovate other schools in this year's budget. And then this is what it would cost to get rid of, or basically, I'll show you down here, to get rid of half of the COVID supplements instead of cutting it. And then this is the estimated cost to open the Justice Center. And if you go on down, Beth, we can show how these pennies here compare up to what the actual costs are. Okay, here is what moving those actual costs to your local cost you is right there, and that's the actual revenue share about 27 short. You're pretty close. But there's one adjustment that has to be made. Sheriff's Department does do COVID for part-time, so that number's gonna probably be about 37,000, actually, if you leave it where it's at. This one is for the courthouse, what I have right now, and it looks like if you just move that amount, you're about 174,000 short if you don't move a tiny bit more pennies over there. But here's how we came up with the courthouse cost, and it'll be a moving target today too. These are what all the requests were. The IT requested 1 person, the Sheriff's Department requested 6. Is that the gross salary or is that their actual? Is that gross with everything? Okay, make sure that wasn't picking up. 2 custodians and a maintenance. This is the cost based on Rutherford County for electricity, natural gas, water, and this is from our consultants for relocation. These are not in your budget yet because I didn't get them in time to put them in because we couldn't keep changing the budget, but we probably need to change those today. What I actually have in your recommended adjustments for this is a couple of reasons. It's 75% of that, because your building's not gonna be open all year next year, and we have 1 floor that won't be open and Rutherford does. But at the same time, you're spiking up on inflation. So probably a good guess of that, what you need in your budget, increased in your utilities, probably 75% of that and probably 100% of that. A lot of the moving costs are in their bonds and local funds, but there's still some of the odds and ends that'll have to be moved that's not counted in there. And that's our consultant's best estimate right there, of what you would think we're gonna need to move the rest of the stuff in the courthouse. Come up to that, and let's go over to.
So this one is about 550,000, that where you have it, that is not built in right now.
Well, if you go back up here, we're about 200
Well,
off, about 174. But if you also,
Yeah,
that's if all these funds, but also we haven't got anything.
that's what I was just adding those up kind of in my head a little more now.
I don't have
600
anything
maybe.
I don't have anything for this reinsurance cost on that building.
Yeah.
Which is gonna be pretty expensive, so
Yeah.
we haven't got that. And then I don't also know how much it's gonna contract maintenance, but that should be paid at courthouse and jail if it's available. And I don't have the grounds contract for like mowing, we don't have an idea what that's gonna be. We don't think those
I
are
mean,
gonna
that-
be huge, that one right, these shouldn't be huge together, but there are gonna be some costs.
I mean, that could very easily creep up.
$200,000.
Well, 200, but I mean, adding all those up.
These,
Three
this
quarters.
total down here is what's done. That's that total up here, it's the same thing, 1.19 million.
Oh, for, with.
So
what is
that
one-
includes that, yes.
That includes that, or does that include all
That
of the?
includes all these costs, but these haven't been added into your budget yet. That's what I'm
Ah,
saying.
okay, got it.
Those I
Got
can
it, got it.
calculate them, but I didn't want to keep changing your budget as a moving target because we had to verify the numbers. So everybody should have had these March 1, but we kept going probably till late April, and people still give us things they didn't know about, but some of these came in late enough that we didn't get them in the budget. But we do have them over here for your adjustments to get you.
Well, just a second now, I'm being super clear here. So the 1.2 is all of that.
Right.
Does that also include the 200-something thousand up above it?
200,
No.
that showed me which one we're talking about.
Scroll up, over here, the 174.
No, that's what I'm estimating without even.
Got it,
including
so,
those. It'd be
okay.
short year if you-
But of this,
Right.
scroll back down, the 1.2, the certified employees there, the certified deputies, those are all included in the budget, so, that is included in the budget currently, right?
Right, all
Because
this
we
is-
got that on time.
All this is included in the budget. just
But
these-
that isn't, so
Right.
that's my point, that the 500, 600,000 that was pointed out is actually, even though it's calculated for here, it's not included
Right.
in the budget.
And we have a group of adjustments, that's why I say
Got it.
that 1.6 is really gonna be about 2 million, and you
Yeah.
need to cut at least 2.5 off.
Yeah.
when you add in these things that you're gonna have to have electricity for those buildings. Those are-
So when you were talking about the 2.5 earlier, I think it's probably more like 3.
Well, that was the kind of easy way.
That, you were counting that in your head when you
And
were,
that would be what I would say you at least need to cut, but
Right.
the further you can bring that disparity from last year back, because if you look at the trend line, the disparity between revenue and expenditures has been slowly creeping up again.
yeah,
And that's what you don't, when you want to keep it pretty consistent as much as you can.
yeah,
And the reason we keep having the disparity and we actually build build fund balance is because non-spent budgetary items and because the economy, even though we've been planning and worried about recession, has been doing pretty well. This year, we're seeing more signs than ever of a recession, and on top of inflation's historical numbers, so there's a big concern how much will be turned over in your, before we get, let's click on highway and make sure the committee understands one more thing. And highway's a good example to show you. When we start talking about these budgets, to how far these are long-term, you see it somewhere here. If you look at the highway, all these are also estimates. So the amount he has left in fund balance here is an estimate that comes into this total, which ends up being his revenue plus expenditures equals empty. That's why I say you need 750 or more, because if Toby spends more than he anticipates because he gets more work done because less rain, then it's gonna bring that number down. Or if one of these revenues we've estimated are short, it's gonna bring that revenue down, which will bring that deficit up. So I would say the state wants you to do at least 112. I would say, I agree, that's the very minimum they need to have in there, because if we miss that significantly, you guys will be back adjusting it anyway.
and
We try to get these where we're actually at. We basically estimated every expense, and then we take its trend of what's been spent in prior years. The problem we've got is a brand new administration spends slightly.
well, and of note there, and Mr. Ellis is gonna talk to you about this, and it's important when you're doing the forward projection. I mean, I think he's seeing 25-30% year-over-year increases 2 years running for asphalt. So,
Keep us on schedule. If you can just talk over to the adjustments, Beth, and we got like 2 minutes. And I'm just gonna show it to them, I'm not even gonna explain. It's items we got late. And like this one, the radio system, only part of it's included in there because Mr. Widener only included the stuff after we're being made. It's never been done that way before. So some of the other departments like sheriff and them are not in there, or more the revenue. These are the adjustments that we built it in based on the resolution of everybody covering their costs. So,
Yep.
and plus, we need to put it in anyway because Ken didn't capture all that this year going there with us. These are what we received late. 2 things. We were told about, what, 2 days ago? That this particular commercial associates is gonna increase their reinsurance cost by 25%. We were told 7 a few before that. And before that, I was told nothing. We had to request it. The other one is the amount paid to the self-insurance board. I've got an 8% increase based on what's in the budget over here for self-insurance, but I think it needs to be looked at closely because the schools, when I look at the trend expense, I don't think it'll be as high as what's requested. Because the schools came out about 2 years ago? So the trend should do like a dip and then back up, but they're actually, the projection from the department came kind of a flat and going back up, so I don't think it's realistic. But that's something the committee will have to determine. This is the same thing. This is the 75% of those utilities, and 110 will need to be added in. That's 489. This is something we found out later. It's to do with the water line. It'll be a flow. This is already in your ARPA, so it'll be a flow through. Revenue expenditures, net impact 0, but it will need to be added to make your budget complete. Same thing right here we discovered. We originally looked at it. EMS doesn't pay COVID on part-time, but sheriff does. That's what it'll cost if you guys decide to do that. And then I think that's it.
No, please do.
Did I miss one?
You didn't talk about these.
Oh, the flood, this is the hazardous mitigation based on the resolution. These are based on our stuff. That's what it will take to zero out the negative balance in your hazardous mitigation program, if you guys want to do that. Basically, want to go by the resolution, that's what the budget needs to be adjusted to. Get rid of it. And then that's the health department. This is in your ARPA, and then this will be a flow through if you add it.
one other note on this, though. All of this budget is built off of, for salaries, a 6% cost of living increase, correct?
Everybody's 6 except for libraries only requested 4, and then ECC only requested 2, but that's something you guys may want to discuss because originally they were on the ARPA. Last year they got pulled off and were told with vacant positions to pay the ARPA. So now they've asked for the ARPA plus the 2%. So a lot of their increases is related to the ARPA that we didn't capture. So you may want to look at reallocating a few more partial cents to cover what made that up. Because we cover 32% of that also, unless you're gonna cut having to cut their pay, but they're also undertaking a local agreement, which we'll discuss. But the issue with because we go to, well, I won't say the board meetings, they do have significant turnover in that particular department. They have issues with the pay. But that's the adjustments, just at a really high level to keep you at 8:30, and I know you'll discuss it a lot more Friday evening, or maybe this evening. You got about 30 minutes this evening. Does
Thank you.
anybody have any quick questions before your 8:30?
Thank you, Mr. Lyon. Okay. Moving on time at this point. EMS.
They are on page 66 and 98 of your document.
Just so we're correct on Robert's rules here, I'd like to entertain a motion to suspend the rules throughout the duration of this meeting to allow,
So moved. Second.
all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All righty.
EMS is on page 66 for their operational, 98 for their capital. And on the index, it says 61 through 69, that's where they'll have the detailed salary sheets, just like on the screen.
Mr. Poss, go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So where do we want to start? We want to start with the capital or the operations?
Let's do operating first,
Okay.
and we'll do capital.
And your same sheet, the actual budget will be on the screen. And on page 66, your budget consolidated with the request to be on there.
So Jay's handing out some copies there. We want to go through each individual item on here.
You may just want to hit that, it's your time, you can hit the highlights as you see fit.
Sure, so, just have a few adjustments in here, and it's maintenance of effort is what I would call it. The first thing, the communications, that's where we're taking over for what EMA is normally had into their budget. So we've added that into ours at their request. It's up to 52,656.
Down here, I think.
How much was it? Tell me that.
35,000 is what it was. It's 52,656 is requested
So you guys requested the EMS?
for the EMA radio system.
Okay.
That's the numbers that we were provided by EMA.
Yeah, no, that's a total.
Okay.
But they're already on there for doing that.
Right. The next increase that we have was on our debt collection services. That payment is to our medical billing company. So when our revenue increases, we have to pay them more. It's a 4.2% fee to them.
What line is that? Oh, okay, got it. Got it.
Which one you
Deck,
want?
I see it, debt collection services. I
Debt
see it.
collection services.
I see it, 275 to 303.
Okay. Okay, you guys got better what you guys look at. Gotcha.
I was gonna look at this.
Where are you at?
It's got weighted on the budget, it's the same thing.
Debt collection service, yeah, right there. So, as we mentioned last month, we had record numbers in our revenues, over $1 million. So obviously that number has to go up, that we have to pay them the 4%. All that's collected back. This next line down will be Verizon Midwest. Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Mr.
That 4%, do they not take it before remitting it to you?
No, they do not.
So they give you the full 100% you kick back for?
That's correct.
Okay.
And then we're invoiced for it.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Frost. I'll have a question there at the end, but go ahead.
It might be easier just to start at the top and go on down.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna.
Start with, past the salaries and go down to the easiest way to do. Start with the first one. Yeah, because the salaries is better than the information sheet. Theirs is
I have a question about the salaries.
communication, 70,000.
So I do have a question about the salaries, since we're gonna go from the top. And forgive me here, because I thought we talked about this before. So are you asking for no increase in salary?
He's got the 6% in there.
So this is with the 6% in
Yeah,
there?
these are with 6%.
And we do ask that the hazard pay, the ARPA funds, we've got to make those permanent, and I've got.
Yeah, no, I'm tracking that.
And that's
Okay.
also got half of the ARPA moved over into his and Sherry's.
Okay, got it.
Because if you look at that summary payroll sheet that's back in here, it'll show.
So one other question, have there been have there been any changes to, because these are all kind of, it looks like they're kind of rolled up here, have there been any changes to specific title or personnel or anything like that?
No, sir.
Nothing like that?
No, there's some discrepancies on, let's see, the deputy chiefs. If you can scroll down to them, I did notice that.
What kind of discrepancy?
Well, they're all in that.
They're all in
When it's broken out into individual, it has, deputy chief of training is the spot that is like grayed out. And that's actually, deputy chief of training is what we need, the one that says deputy chief of operations. We don't have a deputy chief of operations.
What kind
Okay,
of,
here we are.
it shows that discrepancy.
Yeah,
right
right.
now.
Yeah, here we go. This
Yeah,
is
So
what
it's
it's-
right here, discrepancy.
Deputy chief of operations,
Are you saying just on the title?
yes,
Yes.
it's just a title issue. This deputy chief of training, see, was not funded last year.
It was.
Okay.
It was, that person was termed, because here it is.
Greg
Missing
terminated
grade.
it, he terminated and took it into overtime.
So we have 3 deputy chiefs and 3 battalion chiefs, that's all we have.
And have these positions, have they been there?
Yes, sir.
And they, so those two that are graded out, were funded previously, but they just haven't been filled?
They're the
They're
positions.
currently-
Well,
Yes, what has happened is this battalion chief position,
That was that one.
yes.
They get, when somebody's terminated, it goes gray and the position reopens
Yeah.
it. But one thing I can say about this, and that's something that's not apparent, Mr. Miller last year asked for more overtime and actually cut a position over there, the assistant, so.
That's correct.
So basically, he's added the overtime and you guys have added it back, so you've really picked up. So you're only going down $3,000 in that count.
Yeah, the deputy chief of operations, it was an assistant chief position, but that was eliminated. So this deputy chief of operations should be changed to deputy chief of training, and then this should have the assistant chief
But what I'm
operations.
saying is after that budget was being set last year, there was a position eliminated, correct? Or is it, and then he moved it to overtime?
Yes, the assistant chief of operations.
so there was one eliminated?
Correct.
No.
Was it eliminated before the budget was set? I can't recall, that's what I'm saying.
Yes, it
And it was, what was his name?
Sam Clark.
Sam, so Sam.
So we had a position eliminated, and then those funds were used toward overtime.
Yes.
And now you are adding that position back.
No.
We have not requested that.
You haven't
No.
requested it back.
And we'll go verify it, because I think it was probably done before we set the budget last year.
Okay.
The PY budget is what the budget was set on, so we'll have to look back and see.
So just to be clear here, neither of those two positions that were grayed out were one of the two that were removed, that was eliminated.
I don't think so.
Well, what it looks to me is a battalion chief, this battalion chief of compliance was moved to a deputy chief level. So when that was moved to deputy chief of compliance, that's probably where this battalion chief is coming from, because that is no longer there.
Well, why don't we do this, when we're at lunch, I'll get payroll to go to the
Okay.
account.
Yep.
And that line item for the last 4 years,
Yep.
to see that number. That number should be one down, and then where we can take it.
Thanks, guys. I'm breaking my own rule and diving into
Yeah,
it.
we're not adding.
I got it.
3 and 3. That's
But you're
correct.
saying the number is right.
1 assistant chief,
One assistant, 3 deputies, and
3
We'll
battalions, that's
get
correct.
this, man.
Got
Make
it.
a note about that, Jessica, get payroll to.
Thanks, guys. Sorry for diving into the
Yeah,
rabbit hole
no, you're
there.
good. All right, anything else on payroll there? As we're going through it, go back to the operating budget.
This yellow line, anything additional anybody requested?
no.
We haven't been able to request anything with, this sheet's not been opened up to us.
Well, that's because of Greg completed back free March, March 1.
I think all that we asked for was the cost of living.
The cost of living.
And then the ARPA cost is that one, that 441 without benefits, that's the ARPA half. That's half your ARPA without benefits.
Yep. Track it.
Half of the EMS is without benefits.
All right.
So I'm saying it needs to be dealt with.
All right, we don't have a whole lot of time left here, but, so moving on down, we've asked for an increase in medical supplies, 30%. That's just the cost of what it's costing us to do business right now. And paramedic tuition, we added that in there this year. We're having a terrible time with staffing, and we need to, we can get AEMTs and EMTs, but we need paramedics on the street to take care of the folks. So we've asked for 10,000 tuition there. That was a slight increase over last year. Disposal fees, we gotta clean out some stuff at the archives, we added that up a little bit. Increase in, where you at? Yes, we did add a little bit there. Other contract services. Diesel fuel, yeah, we're having to pull from our budget right now. That's obviously market price, and our call volume is increasing every month. So we just need the diesel to keep the ambulances going. Trying to get that budget line a little bit better off right there. What's your next one? Tire, instructional supplies and materials. American Heart Association's gone up on us on the cost of the cards, and we're looking at replacing our CPR mannequins with over 100 people to train. They wear out quite quickly for us. Tires and tubes, so we upgraded, the ambulances we have now, they use a 19 and a half inch tire versus a 16-inch tire. Those are about twice the cost. So we do get more miles out of them, but as we switch over, about half of our fleet right now uses those, and about half uses the 16s. So we need that increase to keep the rubber on the road. Okay, next one. Vehicle parts. So we have supply chain has our ambulance fleet aging. We have 6 ambulances ordered. We don't have delivery time on them. So we're asking for slight increase of vehicle parts to keep that aging fleet on the road. Software, this is just what we need in the office. Other supplies and materials. The liability insurance is through VFIS. That's our
That's just their increase.
What is it though?
medical malpractice liability. Yeah, correct. So that's a number that they've given us to expect for this next year. The refunds, every now and then, we get paid by insurances accidentally, and we have to pull that money back out of our budget. So that's actually money that's come into the county. We're just trying to keep in line with the budget. It will be part of our revenue. Data processing equipment, Jake, that was, I think,
Yeah, the data processing equipment is, we've got station computers that are well over 5 years old, and we just need to start rotating those out because we're having issues with them, so.
furniture and fixtures. Our training room chairs need to be replaced. They literally have duct tape on them to keep them sanitary right now. Maintenance equipment, so that's a big increase right there. And this can come out if we were to continue with the maintenance facility that's been talked about with the ARPA funds. And I think that's pretty much been pulled. But back to the tires. The tire machines that we have right now in our shop that service our ambulances, they will not hold the 19.5-inch tires. It's just not big enough. So there's 2 pieces of equipment that they need to be able to service those tires in our shop, and that's what that is for. We requested it as part of the maintenance facility if we were going to receive it. If we're not going to receive it, then we need to have this to take care of it.
Mr. Cross,
Now,
well, I know we're coming up close on time, and can we look at capital? Because that's where some of the big requests are.
And can you tell me what 2 line items and how much you put in for that radio? Because we need the exact amount.
the radio.
For countywide, it's countywide,
52,600.
52,600.
600.
What 2 line items did you put in those? And you broke them on that? Which one?
Communications, EMS, they're showing
We did those adjustments. But I think it came in place.
That's the numbers are good. Yeah, so capital projects, other health equipment here, that's gonna be to replace some cardiac monitors. So our cardiac monitors are over 5 years old. We have 2 or 3 right now that are completely out of service. We've increased some maintenance repair in there to get those fixed, but we want to replace, like I said, 3 or 4 of those are about, they're very, very expensive. So that's what that's in there for. The building construction right here, we have 4 stations that are aged and really just not what we need at all. So as part of the ARPA funds, we asked to get at least 2 of those replaced, or to add 1 up in White House. And that's what we talked, we had 45 calls last month where we weren't able, Robertson County, through an agreement, responds to. So we are looking at putting a station in White House. We do have a plan.
And one note on that we discussed, if we put that one up in White House, it needs a crew, right?
That's correct.
So it would entail a crew.
There'll be 9 new employees in the new ambulance.
That's
Three
correct. Once it's
shifts by 3 people.
Three shifts
of
of
3
3 people, that's correct. So,
And you'll need equipment too.
And, yeah.
we have the ambulances.
Okay.
Yeah, we have the ambulances. So there's been discussion, on, and we'll have to go with the county commission, what is best with them to, either put a station there at White House or replace one of them that we need to replace, or 2 of them that we need to replace. So that's what that's for. Motor vehicles, EMS, those are command staff vehicles. We keep those on a rotation. If you went on out, you'd see we're gonna ask for those every other year going forward. So it'll be the 2 command staff vehicles where our supervisors respond out to help the ambulance, especially in the rural areas where we don't have the fire support we need. That is a replacement of 3 ambulances, same thing that we ask for every year. We have to keep those rotated. Keep them under 200,000 miles is our goal, and so that's just maintenance there on our fleet.
And those are, how many months out? So you said you had 6 on back order?
We ordered 3 in August of '21. We still haven't received those. We ordered 3 more in August of '22. And no delivery date on any of those yet.
So at least a year.
Yes.
How many total?
Currently, the 3 that we ordered in 21 are waiting on some air conditioner parts,
So-
supply chain issues, so.
We got one more question and then we're at time. Go ahead, Mr. Becker.
How many total ambulances do you have in the fleet?
We run 13 ALS ambulances and 5 BLS ambulances, which are smaller transits. So I think we have 22 counting reserves.
And you're saying you have 6 on back order?
That's correct.
Can you go back to the adjustment page, because I need to ask you for some.
And this will be the last question,
The
unless you have any other
17
big highlights.
Okay.
Thanks.
You see, there's you got 52.6, but 17.656, just go back and adjust.
While they're discussing that real quick, the other thing that we sent out was, or gave out, was a chart of the surrounding counties and their pay scale and their work shifts. So you can kind of see where we fall with the hazard pay, and then if we were to lose that hazard pay, you see where we're at on that. We've had 3 people in the past week has put in notices, and 2 of those are going to other place where they have a better shift, 12-hour shift options and stuff like that, so they can be home at night. But
So, guys, I know did you get your question answered?
Yes,
All right.
he's got 52,000 some, but he already had money for radios in the past.
All right.
So it only increased by the 17,656, which is the amount I think the license provides us. So EMS is actually already included theirs in there. We
So,
weren't sure.
We're at time. I very much appreciate it, and I would encourage everybody to look at this, because they did, we talked about doing good benchmarking. You guys did a good job of this, and I do appreciate it.
And the one more thing, they do also do the medical examiner, but that's paid by fees, the extra medical examiner fees. And then you do have your regular medical examiner.
Yeah.
That's paid to the doctor.
Dr. Peterson did ask for a slight increase this year just due to call volume and the amount of work that he's having to do.
So he's 25%? Is that correct?
I'm sorry.
25%?
yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's
$500 a month is all that he has, right?
$6,000, 25%.
Any other questions?
Thank you, guys.
I don't know whether the paper's on that sheet today.
No,
Thanks, y'all.
and currently, his call, or his caseload for that is probably double,
What he started out at.
yeah, from what he
And
started.
he hasn't asked for an increase.
All righty, and I'm sorry to cut you all off. I very much appreciate your time.
Thank y'all. Thank you.
All right, HR and risk management.
They were on page 30 for HR, and then risk management is the actual budget that says risk management, which is on page.
70. Our thing's the 70.
Yeah, and then the budget, in the actual budget document.
Okay.
Yeah, we're giving you the page numbers. that make it.
39.
Well, her, human resources is 30.
I'm talking about risk, I'm sorry.
Yeah, then there's risk is 39, and then there's also the risk fund, which is under your miscellaneous, which is also, 126, the last page of the budget. So there's 3 things involved. And we haven't done any changes in the risk management, but we'll talk about it, but so let's go to HR first.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Thank you, ma'am.
So, HR does not have really in a depth, need to have anything extra. So you're gonna find that the budget is very much set like it was last year. The only difference is that we're asking for a $10,000 amount to take care of a benefits, my benefits check, which is an application to use for onboarding and to help in the process of benefits administration. So, very basic, not a lot of fluff. We're here to do a job to help maintain the interest of employees and administration for county benefit purpose. So, very basic, not asking for anything.
Let's go over to risk management, page 39, which is within the appropriations you have. And right now, we have not adjusted any of the risk management stuff, but we'll show you what flows through and go to the risk management fund and go to the adjustment sheets. It's on page 39.
39.
These are in pink because those are the ones we're talking about. We got the notification, I guess, about 2 days ago, that one of the carriers are gonna increase 25%. All these pink numbers are made up of 2 things. These are reinsurance amounts, or there's one that we pay, I think, to the city for their insurance, the EMS station, we got that broken out for you. And then also, the actual amount for our self-insurance plan. And then the other one's the premiums on bonds. We'll discuss that later, but there's not an election year, so it was taken out, not bonds. So let's go on over to the OJI. If you look over here, based on their request, it would take an 8% revenue request to make it break even, and I've talked to Cheryl about it a little bit. Probably need the committee's decision here too. That was their request based on a few short line items. But if you go back and look at her historical, we've actually had, get the library company, and then I had a few of those. Yeah, let me look at the history of this one, because it's pretty important why it's where it's at. We used to have the school department in there. If you look at the expenses, this is how the expenses fall into school. They dropped out over here and keep going. Frozen VPC. There we go. Yes, then free six pages. At least they can see the history here. If you look at that expense line, that's the actual expenses for this thing since 08-09, the year I came. Going over. And the schools dropped out. Was it 1920, I believe? Or is it 20? Where the schools have dropped out, so the actual trend line should be showing it down. That's where we're showing for 22-23 based on our estimates is the 1.76. And the 2297 is what's requested next year. And I've talked to Eric, we still have several runoff claims probably from the schools, is that correct, Eric?
That is correct.
But they should be getting smaller each month because we're paying one out here and there, so. It's showing for this need an 8% increase, but I think the committee parties come back and revisit that. It probably doesn't need an increase at all. But that's just kind of where me and Cheryl talked about it. She wasn't here when all this stuff changed, so she wasn't aware of it.
So I guess my concern would be, can we not go back to the school board to discuss why we did not give them runoff money? Why was that never?
Because when it was agreed with the school board on their agreement, is it was to be funded each year and then our reserves are to cover runoff. So no, it's a contractual agreement. So no, basically we cover runoffs, and what you should show in this fund is we got the school, there's inflation because there's 60% of our business. It should do with the runoffs, the downward curve, flatten out and go back up. My opinion is we're still on the downward curve on cost, not an upward curve. So and I could be wrong, but I don't think we needed an 8% increase. I think we need to kind of flatten it back out for last year. We know the schools aren't going to pay runoffs. We looked at that when they dropped out, it was contractual. Basically, it was the pay as you go, the reserve, and if you look, when the schools dropped out, we actually had a fairly good reserve there, that should cover runoffs. Sorry, just make sure everybody understands.
I am interested, just for context, what was the purpose of that? What was
The school said they could do it cheaper than self-insurance, so they dropped out. Same thing, they used to be, their non-certified used to be in our health insurance, and they said they could do it cheaper than their own, so they dropped out of it and did their own thing several years back.
Well, they say they're doing their own, but I mean, is that rolled up in their budget request that comes to us?
Yes.
Okay, then.
I think they've got, and you can ask.
I mean,
them.
because that was an interesting question, right? Like, I mean, because that would tell the full story. In order to tell the full story, we would have to be, this looks like it's a good story.
They'll go
You
over
don't
the
know the other
revenues.
half.
Right.
They'll go over the revenues. I think. If you look at the revenues, the schools pay $1.9 million, so that was to cover their costs. So you would expect, if it's breaking even, we're gonna have a downward curve on those costs for several years.
Yeah.
Which we were, at one point, we weren't breaking even when I first got here, but then my recommendation was to do payments as you go, because it's breaking even. But if you unhide that way, they kind of see revenue history over here too on this thing. But mine is, when we get to this one, my recommendation is we flatten based on that, the cost curve out. I think it's still a negative cost curve, but at least flatten it out. I don't think you can bucket.
Okay.
Kind of where I'm going. These are your historical stuff. This is all in your budget. This is hid back in here because your budget doc is what we got right now. Kind of gives you an idea where we're at. So these numbers right here, they go through, like the 1375 comes from the general fund, the 657 comes from highway. And then what you see over in the general fund, that all those lines are shown is made up of the 1375 in the general plus the reinsurers for liability and OJI, what mainly liability. Because we're self-insured except for two places I can think of. One is the malpractice for EMS, and I think there's some malpractice for your coroner. And then I think Mr. Widener has some insurance on volunteers, and he has insurance on equipment, because I've had several questions about why we're insuring equipment, which I've had some questions.
All right. Any other questions for HR?
And I thank you, and I'm just hoping that the board and the commissioners will understand the need for human resources. We were established 2 years ago, and there is a definite need to maintain human resources. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right. We're now a little bit ahead of schedule. ECD?
They're on page 60. The ECD reimburses us for all their costs, so it's a flow through. Plus, they also pay us $40,000 reimbursement for the cost of using their IT infrastructure. And also the building utilities.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Morning,
For
Mike.
those of you who I haven't met, I'm Mike Guthrie, and I'm with the ECD. I think David just gave my presentation, so.
I'll cut the background, sorry. Just you got some stuff you got in here.
Absolutely, just a little bit of information about the ECD. Our primary responsibility is to ensure that 911 calls within Sumner County are properly routed to the appropriate PSAPs or public safety answering points and answered. Additionally, there are many things that go behind that, but we're also responsible for addressing throughout the entire county. We take that data, we upload that to maps, as well as other GIS-related layers that are very helpful to public safety. We upload those maps to the computer-aided dispatch system at the ECC. And we also send that out to Gouldsville Police Department and the responders who are out in the field, police, fire, and medical. Additionally, our office is responsible for purchasing and maintaining much of the equipment that's in the ECC. We have 3 employees. There's an administrative assistant, there's a GIS professional, and there's me. And then at my board, the ECD has approved an IT position, which will be hopefully in place around the 1st of July. And what we do beyond that, we're funded by the state, the Tennessee Emergency Communications Board. You've probably seen that $1.50 fee on your telephone bill, the 911 fees. That is sent to the state by the carriers. That money is then divided up among the districts, which are there are 100 across the state, and then that money is sent back to the individual districts across the state. What we're doing here is the Emergency Communications Board is appropriating money back to the county, which will reimburse you for the salary and benefits of the currently 3, about to be 4 employees. Additionally, there's a $40,000 stipend that will go to the county for IT support. It's an all-time IT support. Once we have our IT person in place, we have to have a backup for IT. This is, and utilities, yes, sir. This is an emergency operation. It's a public safety answering point. We cannot be without IT. So we definitely want that backup in place, and that's why we're paying the county for utilities and for IT support.
And they don't pay rent because the E911, when we originally built the buildings, contributed, I think it was $1.5 million. So we can't charge, we don't charge them for rent for that reason.
Yes. And this is established through an interlocal agreement between the ECD and the county. So I'll be happy to entertain any questions.
Those is all passed through.
It's all passed through, netting 40 to cover toward our IT and the utilities.
So no cost to the county, plus the benefit of, how long did this civil defense ECD department existed, I guess, is it?
In 1986, there was a referendum, and based on a statute, the county could create a referendum, let voters vote on it, and then the district was established. So 1986 is when it was established, 1987 is when it actually took effect.
And just to make it cleaner, the way, the reason you only see it started in 2021 is because we do all their like payroll stuff. And they don't want to have to set up EIN numbers and go through all those issues. That's why it goes through, plus we want to reimburse us for that.
That's why I was curious, just because like it dropped
Used to be a
on it.
big contract.
Yeah.
For different providers, but they weren't doing the same way, so when they actually started having employees versus this large contract, which I think the board determined the contract wasn't a good fit, it was better to have employees because they had a better control of what was going on. So at the time when they decided to do that, they didn't want to try to set up a whole payroll system and everything. So they started reimbursing us and using some of our IT and reimbursing. That's kind of the history of that, because I know everybody's looking at
So I mean,
something
you know,
period.
this is one of these things that's, which was the point of that resolution last time around. I mean, in some cases, we do a good job of this, of accounting with different departments, kind of properly paying for it. In other cases, we don't.
Well,
So-
I work with Mr. Guthrie and the mayor.
This is the one where we do.
Yeah, we work together on this one to make sure that this. Mr. Guthrie.
I would like to think the ECD sets that.
But that's one when we say.
Well, there's no such thing as perfect. I bet I can find $1 in there,
Close,
but.
you probably could, yes, sir.
All righty, any other questions?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
So when you say it's all passed through, what's that mean again?
No, we're just, we clicked over on the revenue, Bethany, for ECD. If you look, it'll be tied exactly to their appropriation plus $40,000 for that other cost. It means they send us a check for it. I've told him probably toward the end of the year because it's gonna be actual cost plus 40. Last year it was just agreed upon amount, but this year it'll be toward the end of the year. But you know, if you look, that's that appropriation exactly for that budget item you looked at plus $40,000. So it's exact flow through. Whatever they expend plus 40.
Now, Commissioner Becker, just to expound upon that a little bit, this is based on a 6% cost of living raise across the county. If that changes, then of course the ECD will they'll go back on those numbers and it would be, you're just gonna be reimbursed for whatever the forced salaries will be and benefits from the ECD back to the county.
Well, it's not connected to me. So who's paying for it? Where's the revenue coming from?
That comes from the ECD. So as you bill the ECD will refund that money to you. So if we only spend $300,000 in salary and benefits, you'll get $300,000 plus $40,000 for IT.
I think your question, who's paying you? Who's?
That's the Tennessee Emergency Communications.
That's a
state
So the whole, the whole.
It comes from the E911 fees that you pay on your telephone.
It's $150 on your phone.
We just have to manage the funds.
You have to manage the funds.
I got you, just manage the funds.
He manages the equipment funds and all the equipment. funds.
So how is this based on 6% when I'm looking at it?
That's something I was gonna tell you right now. Mr. Guthrie asked for himself for only 2%. He asked for 6% for his staff. And then I mentioned that too, but he said he already had his board approved 2%.
And so our budget committee met 2 weeks ago, and so that budget was approved there, and it'll be forwarded to the ECD board, which meets this coming Monday. So full disclosure there. One of my employees, administrative assistant, she's been an EMS employee for close to 10 years, I think. She came in making $38,000. So I went back and looked at other similar positions throughout the county, and they're making around $44,000. I need to bump up her salary to be in line with what those other salaries are.
That's on page 73, Mr. Baker does the details.
So it's 6% in total. You're showing 2% for your position, and so the other positions are greater than 6% because it averages 6%.
It'll show you it'll show you the details, Mr. Baker, on page 72.
If you only approve 4% COLA, then those funds will come back down, except for the administrative assistant, which needs to be in line with the other administrative assistants throughout the county.
What page you say, Mr. Long?
It should be
72 on the
page
agenda.
72.
It's on this one.
Oh, on the agenda. Yeah, it's on the agenda.
And you're picking up another GIS personnel.
Assistant administrator, Mr. Brown, that person will be paid a range of $70,000 to $80,000 plus salary benefits. Again, that money will be sent back to the county from the ECD.
Yellow is anything here that's different than the cost of living that's loaded. If you look, Mr. Guthrie's 6%, if you did 6%, be 5,928, that calculates based on what he's asked. So he's asked for 2%, that made that less. The 80,000 for the network specialist, he's asking for it to flow through. And then his admin assistant, in addition to cost of living, he's asking for 3691 to bring her up to 44,482 to make her more in line with other staff. That's kind of the details. That's why it looks so weird on your differences.
Yeah. David, I think what we did was we took 6% of this, which is the cost of living, and then to get her up to the mid-44 range, we added this amount in here.
You're just trying to get her to 44,482.
There's a formula, so if the COLA goes down,
Hers.
it would still be 60.
Or you requested a flat amount for her to be 44,482. So there's a little formula that, and it may be rounded, because there's 2,080 hours, so if it was 40, if you said get close as you can to 45, it can vary almost $20.
Go ahead, Mr. Klein.
So when does the $1.50 go to up to $1.55?
Do what now? I'm sorry.
The $1.50 on our phone bills, when does it go up to $1.55?
That's a good question. That's beyond my scope, and I don't even want to answer.
If
because
they
I don't
just
wanna take
sneak it in,
cost.
right?
I don't know if they're going to sneak it in, but
Do they?
It increased last year.
it'll be
All
sent
right.
back in some way to the 100 districts across the state in support of the 911 fees.
All right.
We only have control of what we have control of
That's
here,
right.
guys. So, any other questions?
All right. Thank you all.
All right, thank you, sir.
You're about 5 to 10 minutes ahead, so it takes 5 minutes, and it takes 5 minutes break.
Yeah, we can do it, we can do it for
We're about
5
15
minutes. 5 minute
minutes.
break. Yep. We're ahead of time.
I thought you were like, really customer. I didn't, I'm just a question.